is when a man understands the truth. The deadliest creature in this world is not the wild predator, but a human being who chooses to hunt another human. Sanger Rainsford was not a man who scared easily. He was a famous hunter, a man who had traveled the world, faced deadly beasts, and walked away from dangers most men would flee before they even began. He believed one simple truth: either you are the hunter or you are the prey. And because he had spent his whole life as the hunter, he had never stopped to wonder what the world looked like through the eyes of the one being chased. One night, he was aboard a luxury yacht, cutting through the Caribbean Sea, on his way to another hunt. The air was heavy, the night was thick, and the sea was unnervingly still. With him was a friend who spoke of a strange island feared by sailors, an island they mentioned only in whispers: Ship Trap Island. He said that men who passed near it felt something unnatural there, as if the sea itself were trying to warn them away. But Rainsford did not take the story seriously. To him, fear was a habit of weak men. He had always seen life the same way, through strength, through skill, and through the certainty of a man who believed he was always in control. Even the most confident men break when the rules change. That night, as he stood on the deck of the yacht, he heard it. Gunshots from deep in the darkness. He froze, listened. Then he stepped closer to the edge, trying to find the source. 3 shots, sharp, close together. Then, silence. A heavy, unnatural silence. And in a single instant, his foot slipped. No time to react. He lost his balance and vanished into the black sea. He screamed, reached for anything to hold on to. But the yacht was already moving away fast. In the thick darkness, there was no one to hear him. He thrashed the water with his arms, fighting the waves. He pushed forward, heading toward the direction he believed the shots had come from. For hours he swam through the night, seeing nothing but endless darkness, hearing nothing but his own breathing and the sound of the water. After a grueling battle with the sea, he finally reached land, exhausted, worn out, on the verge of collapse, but alive. When he lifted his head, he found himself on a strange island, dark, silent, surrounded by a heavy silence unlike any natural quiet. He began walking along the shore, and then he saw them. Footprints, streaks of blood, and empty shells. He realized someone had been here not long ago, and that something terrifying had happened in this forest. Then, through the trees and the darkness, a massive, strange mansion appeared before him, shining in the heart of the island, as if it had stepped out of another world. The presence of that mansion on such a deserted island made no sense at all. But at that moment, he had no luxury to question it. All he wanted was food, warmth, and a place to sleep. He approached the great door and knocked. Only moments later, the door opened to a sight he had never expected. A huge man stood there in silence, his features harsh, his eyes lifeless, holding a pistol at the ready. And before Rainsford could say a word, another man appeared from behind him. He was tall, elegant, and impeccably polite, carrying himself the way noblemen carry their old authority. He smiled at him as though he already knew him, then welcomed him with surprising warmth. He introduced himself as General Zaroff. From the very first moment, Zaroff seemed like no ordinary man. His voice was calm, his words refined, his appearance aristocratic, and his knowledge strikingly vast. He knew Rainsford's name, had read about his experience in hunting, and even showed genuine admiration for him. The two sat down to dinner, and a long conversation unfolded between them about hunting. Rainsford quickly discovered that the general was not merely an enthusiast, but a man who had devoted his entire life to the chase. He had hunted in many parts of the world and killed everything a hunter could dream of. But something strange emerged in the way he spoke. Something faint at first, then clearer with every sentence. General Zaroff was bored. He said that hunting, for all its magnificence, no longer gave him the excitement he had once sought. Animals, no matter how fierce they were, remained limited in intelligence. They ran, they hid, they resisted, but they did not think as they should. Then he smiled as he sipped his drink and said in a terrifying, calm voice, at last, he had found the only animal truly worth hunting, an animal that could think.
Then he smiled as he sipped his drink and delivered his words with a terrifying calmness. He had finally found the only animal truly worth hunting, an animal that can reason. At first, Rainsford thought he was joking, but when he looked into the man's eyes, he instantly understood that what he was hearing wasn't a joke, but a confession. Then the general revealed the whole truth. He had been living on this island for years, turning it into a private arena for his favorite game. Lost men or survivors from the sea would come to him, and he would give them food, clothing, and rest. And then he would offer them a game, a seemingly simple game. He releases them into the jungle, gives them a head start, and then he begins the hunt. If they survive for 3 days, they win their freedom. But if they fail, the game is over. Silence fell between the two men, and Rainsford, who had always spoken of hunting as a noble art, suddenly found himself facing a twisted, terrifying version of his own logic. Here, the prey was no longer a tiger, a leopard, or a wild beast. Here, man was the prey. He stated clearly that what the general was doing wasn't hunting, it was murder. But the general didn't get angry. He merely smiled and said that the strong have always ruled the weak, and that the world, at its core, is nothing more than an arena where the strongest and smartest win. Then he uttered the sentence that froze the blood in his guest's veins. Tomorrow, you will be the new player. In that exact moment, whatever calm remained vanished entirely. The mansion was no longer a shelter, the food was no longer hospitality, and the conversation was no longer a chat between two cultured men. It was a cold prelude to a death sentence.
Rainsford tried to refuse, but refusal was not an option. He was given a knife, some food, and only a little time before the hunt began. And just like that, after a lifetime as a hunter, for the first time, he became the prey. He entered the forest, his heart pounding with a violence he had never known before. And the first thing he realized was that the night itself had changed. Everything felt alive and dangerous. Every moving leaf sounded like a footstep. Every breath of wind felt like something drawing closer.
Every passing minute made him feel that death was moving somewhere behind him. At first, he ran without any clear plan, the way every terrified prey runs. But he quickly forced himself to stop. He was a skilled hunter, and he knew that panic alone was a certain path to death. If he wanted to survive, he had to think with the mind of a hunter, not the fear of prey. So he began to erase his tracks, change direction, leave false trails, and move in zigzags to confuse the hunter. The forest was thick, suffocating, thorny, and time moved with painful slowness. And as dawn drew near, he climbed a tall tree and hid among its branches, watching in silence, breathing hard, trying to control his terror. Then, after what felt longer than a lifetime, General Zaroff finally appeared. He walked with astonishing calm, as if he were not hunting a desperate man, but strolling through a garden he knew stone by stone. And in a terrifying moment, he stopped almost beneath the tree where Rainsford was hiding. Rainsford felt that his heart would betray him before his voice ever could. But he was not discovered. The general only smiled, then turned and walked away. And in that moment, he understood the new truth. The general knew where he was. He simply did not want to end the game too quickly. He was enjoying it.
That realization was enough to turn fear into something else, into angry determination. If the general saw this as entertainment, then he would make him pay for that entertainment. At first light, Rainsford began using everything he had learned about hunting. But this time, he was not the hunter. He was the prey that had learned how to fight back. He built his first trap carefully, securing a heavy log to fall on the man chasing him. Then he moved away and waited. And later, he heard the crash. But when the general appeared again, he was still alive. Injured, yes, but more excited than ever. He praised his opponent the way a chess player praises a rival for a brilliant move. Rainsford kept running, but he realized the forest would not protect him forever. So he built a second trap, then a third, using pits, branches, and everything nature could give a man trying to stay alive. And one of those traps killed the giant servant, that silent wall that did not seem easy to break. And another one wounded the dog the general had set loose behind him. With every encounter, Rainsford could feel himself changing. The fear was still there, but it no longer paralyzed him. He had become sharper, more savage, and more aware of what it truly meant to be hunted to the very end. But the ground itself was beginning to run out beneath him. The forest that had seemed wide at first was starting to close in, and the choices that had once seemed many were beginning to disappear. And the dogs were getting closer, closer with every passing moment. Then Rainsford reached the edge of the island. In front of him was the roaring sea. Behind him stood the man who had turned killing into a sport. It was a moment of complete despair. There was nowhere left to run. The abyss lay below him, and the enemy stood right in front of him. The general moved closer, slowly, calmly, like a man who already knew he had won, like a victor standing over an opponent who had nothing left. To him, the game was over. But in that final moment, Rainsford did the one thing no one expected. He jumped off the cliff and into the sea. He disappeared into the darkness and the waves, And the general, after looking down and seeing the water swallow him, assumed the sea had finished what the game had started. So he returned to his mansion, slightly tired and perhaps a little disappointed that he had been denied the pleasure of a direct victory. But the night was far from over. Out there in the dark sea, Rainsford was still fighting for one final chance. He swam silently around the island in one of the most desperate and dangerous moments of his life. He was no longer running. He was coming back, not as prey, but as an equal, because he had understood something important. Real survival does not come from hiding. It comes from ending the game itself.
Some games don't end when a player escapes. They begin when the prey returns from the dead. And that night, General Zaroff was about to discover he wasn't the only hunter in the room. General Zaroff entered his quarters with heavy, uncharacteristic steps. His features were tight with suppressed frustration. He carelessly tossed his gloves onto the table as if they had suddenly lost all value. He felt a boundless disappointment. To him, Rainsford hadn't been defeated. He had chosen a coward's way out by throwing himself into the sea. He muttered bitterly while staring out the dark window, considering this the price of playing with amateurs. Death by drowning had ruined the thrill of the ultimate hunt for him. That moment he had been waiting for with a sickly passion. The moment of confrontation. The moment of truth. The shadow moved, slowly, with deadly silence. Something slipped from behind the heavy velvet curtains. Rainsford stepped out into the dim light. He didn't look like a man who had barely survived, but like a creature returning from hell. A predator that had finally found its way into its rival's lair. The blood froze in the general's veins for a few seconds. His disappointment vanished instantly, replaced by a cold shock mixed with a terrifying admiration. He turned slowly and looked at the man he thought was shark food. But what he saw was no prey. It wasn't a look of fear. It was the end. Zaroff said in a low voice, his deadly coldness returning. So, the game is not over yet. And for the first time on this island, it was no longer clear who was the hunter and who was the prey. What do you do when you return to your room, thinking the human hunt is over, only to find the prey you thought drowned in the sea, waiting for you in the dark? This is how history's most dangerous game turns around. A suffocating silence filled the room, the heavy silence before the storm. Rainsford didn't say a word. His eyes burned with a fire of vengeance the ocean couldn't extinguish. He took a single step forward, a calculated step, weighing every movement like a beast ready to pounce. Zaroff, desperately trying to maintain his fake composure, slowly and stealthily slid his hand toward the desk drawer where he kept his silver pistol. The general forced a stiff smile, adopting a diplomatic tone. Rainsford, I congratulate you. You have won the game. You can leave the island tomorrow. But Rainsford tilted his head slightly, and with a hoarse voice from deep within his chest, he replied, I am not a winning player, Zaroff. I am a beast at bay, and a beast takes no gifts. And before the general's fingers could touch the grip of his gun, Rainsford lunged through the air like a panther. The desk crashed, and the weapon rolled away into the shadows. The sound of heavy breathing and a brutal struggle erupted, drowning out the roaring waves of the sea outside. And that night, only one of them would be thrown to the starving hounds, while the other would sleep in that very comfort.